All right, so this is group one's third concept discussion, going over chapters 32 and 33. So I'm going to share my screen, I think. Am I doing it?
Yeah.
Okay, let me get our faces out of the way. And I thought I would just go through the notes and then we all can ask the questions as we go through. And if anything jumps in, just, ask away. Sorry, my notes are a little messy, but so navigating the menu screen, I feel like we're fairly good at, and I think all the basic things are going to be on the different systems. They're just going to look a little different based on what manufacturer we have. But I think it's pretty self-explanatory unless someone had a question about that. No?
Actually, now that I think about it,
Yeah, do
it's
it.
it's always been confusing to me when text will move it up and down. So I looked through the chapter and I think Professor Sales mentioned it before, but moving it left to right is like going to be your density
The
or
history.
brightness, and then up or down is going to affect your contrast. Yeah, so like on page 540, on that second kind of side
Yeah.
to side movement of the cursor while depressing the mouse button will increase brightness from left to right. And then contrast is increased by moving the cursor up or
And
decreased by moving it down.
that makes sense.
Okay. Would that be the same thing as like the whole window level and window width? Because window level is like,
Yes.
got it.
Yeah.
So window width would be so lengthening and shortening the grayscale, which would be left to right, or would that be up and down?
I think that's up or down.
Yeah,
Because
I
Because
think that
Density or contrast is left.
oh,
Brightness and density are the ones that are up and down.
okay, so here on windowing, it says window level image brightness, which is density.
Mhm.
So that would be left to right is window level, and then window width is lengthening or shortening the grayscale. So I think grayscale has to do with contrast, but wouldn't you think that like level, like you're going up or down a level, right?
yeah,
And
Yeah,
then width,
let me go. That's a different part of the chapter. I think it's right here. So it doesn't talk about left or right specifically, if I remember,
yeah.
but the level is the brightness. So I think of it as like the sun is coming up, right? For me, that's how I
Oh,
thought of that. Whereas the width, you're lengthening or shortening the grayscale. But
okay.
I don't know how that correlates to the control panel. At CMH, we don't really do that control panel stuff very much,
Yeah.
um, like at all, other than annotation. So in the practical sense, I don't know. But I just think of the level as like the sun is coming up, it's gonna get brighter, it's gonna get darker, and then the width is the length or shortening of the grayscale. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah.
yeah,
That
that
makes
does.
sense.
And then it might also be different by different manufacturers also for the up and the down. I'm unclear
Yeah.
on that. Does that make sense to everybody as much as we know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Perfect. Fixing mistakes, I think the big thing was like making sure that we're not deleting data, but we'll go into that later. So speed class. I think Stephanie, you had some speed class questions.
Yes. More so just speed class, does it just tell us the radiation that's needed slash the sensitivity of the hardware, or is there more to it? Because I know there was a part that said that it's determined during installation by like management and radiologists. But is that just the primary consensus of it all to it, or is there more to it that we should be understanding? Because I know that's inversely proportional, where if it's 400 speed class, it's less radiation needed, but if it's a lower speed class, it's more radiation needed. But is that all we really need to know about it?
I think so. Film was originally 200, correct? That was like the traditional one. And I
Yeah.
actually asked at my site, and he wasn't 100%. He said he wouldn't bet me $100, but he was pretty sure that their speed class is 400. Said if it's not 400, it's 200, but I'm pretty sure it's 400. Which just means that the radiation is going to get there basically twice as fast. So time would be half. So we would half the exposure.
So then you would be using a lower exposure for that because the higher the speed class, the lower technique needed because the X-rays are getting picked up quicker,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Like the radiation.
And
Go ahead.
I think as far as like lower technique, I think like the differentiation should be between like a lower mass as opposed to a lower KV because you still need the penetration.
It's
You
lower
know,
speed is what it is, right?
yeah, so you need less photons, which would be less mass to get the same result, which then like in your notes right here, highlighted in blue, 400 speed would be a half reduction in exposure rates. Yeah, I think that's just it allows you the faster speed just allows you to decrease your mass, decrease your patient exposure, which he discusses later, Professor Steele discusses later in regards to like KVP and misnomers regarding that.
Does that answer your question, Stephanie?
Yes and no, because it like helps understand like the speed class, but is that generally all there is to it? Because I know in his announcement he did specify like what is speed class, what does it do? Is it just basically what everyone said? Like there's nothing else to it. It's just the radiation sensitivity, how much
Yeah.
I
Go ahead.
just
um
what you were saying. Yeah, sorry.
yeah, I think it's important to know um like how it's determined in the department, like who controls that, and then basically what it does. I don't really see a whole lot other than like the average plate exposure of 200 speed is 10 microgray air, and the 400, the plate exposure is 5 microgray air, which shows like a half reduction in the exposure rates. But I didn't see, I mean, really anything else like super crazy on other than like um they nearly all can be operated on a speed class of 3 to 400 without the appearance of substantial model in the image. So other than there's no real reason to choose a lower speed class other than like that's just what the radiologist likes. I think that's what Professor Steele was trying to get at.
Yeah.
So
And is
I
it truly only specified during installation? Like once it's installed, you can't change it, right?
What's done is done, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Never.
also I think like when it was film based, there was a lot more to speed class with
That's
the
what I
actual
was gonna
plate and the
say.
phosphor plates. But with digital, all we need to know is that it's the computer system defines the speed and then the speed level and stuff like that. But I think yeah, when it was like film based, it was like a lot more to it. But now that it's digitized,
Yeah, I
it's
think when it was film, it had something to do with the density of the patient, if I remember correctly. I didn't write that down.
something about the phosphor plates or something like
Yeah, it says for traditional film-based, speed was clearly defined because the target outcome was to produce an average density on a standard film that would measure 2.5 and on this whatever device, densiometer device. And then we would have the correct exposure for film. Like that's why it had to be 200 for that. But now with digital, like I think you're right, Natalie. I think it doesn't matter as much anymore as long as like hopefully they're setting a higher speed class so that we can have less exposure to our patients.
Yeah.
Any other
And
thoughts? Speed
I
class.
noted that speed class will be directly connected with techniques. I think he said that, which is why I wrote it down.
That makes sense.
Because of the seconds for the mass.
Yeah, just because of how much exposure the system needs.
Mm-hmm.
to produce adequate images.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. All right, should I move on?
Yeah.
So exposure indicators, I had some questions. I don't know why I get so confusing. Exposure indicators looks to me the same as like EI number, and I know they're related. And then, so I always tend to get like confused here. So it says
Mhm.
estimating the exposure level received at the image director is derived from the initial pixel values. That's like just too much for my brain.
It is. It
What
really
is that
is.
even, what is that even saying here? So I understand we want to have the highest diagnostic quality possible with the lowest exposure rates, right? Like that makes sense. So finding like that fine line. And then I don't know, what's the difference between the exposure indicators? Is that just the reason behind the EI number? Is that where I'm confused?
Thought it
That,
was the same thing.
It is the same thing, kind of, right?
yeah.
It's
I
just
think,
measurement.
yeah, I think it's just giving you like a ballpark, like what, like a target value, you know? Like, so on page 544, it says for each manufacturer, a target median pixel value, which represents the ideal amount of X-ray exposure at the detectors, is set as a center point of the exposure indicator scale. So, with that in mind,
Like that picture.
yeah, yeah. So it's basically just taking your lowest value and your highest value, finding that middle based on what anatomy you're imaging.
So
I think.
Wait, Lisa, sorry, what was your question again?
all of this, not a specific question. I just get confused between the EI number and the exposure indicators. And we have Fuji where at my site. So we have the S number. So that's our EI number, correct? And it tells
Yeah.
basically when I look at it, if my EI number is coming up as like double digits, like say it's 79, I way overexposed that patient. If it's a big number for us, it's way underexposure. So how is that telling me what the medium is? Like I'm just not putting
I
that together with the practical experience that I'm having.
Yeah, there's at least at my site, there's a chart that Fuji provided us with like chest x-rays with upper extremity, lower extremity, abdomen, pelvis, whatever. And it gives you like a range of what your S number should be.
Is that
So
the deviation index? No.
um that would be
Like all these things I feel like to me are,
yeah.
and I just kind of get,
I
oh,
I think it would like so
here's that. Like, well, what in the heck?
yeah, so your exposure indicator is just your S number. And then you have your, ideal exposure 200, double, and then half your exposure. I yeah, your deviation, I think is something like that just gives you how far outside on, whether you're overexposed or underexposed. I think that's just your deviation index based off your exposure indicator number.
So for example, if you look at my screen, so here's the deviation index. The third one, inversely proportional, I believe that's what we have at
Yes.
H with the S number. Which do you guys have? So the S number is saying, what is it saying?
That's the EI. So the exposure indicator, it's like that's the generalized term, and then each manufacturer, like in that list, has like it'll be the S number would be the EI. So it's
Mhm.
like it would be, or like in that list, it'll have different manufacturers. So the EI is basically how much radiation reached the plate. And with that, that's like where the histogram comes in, depending on the body part. But
Okay.
it's like if not that many fall on this side, but then there's a lot that fall here, and then there's not that many. It's going to be that median number always, and then that's going to be the EI number. But
Oh,
the EI is how much radiation reached the plate, but then the EI number is giving you the actual number from that histogram. And then the deviation index is just like a universal readout of that. This is how I'm understanding it, of the EI number, because there's so many manufacturers that have different things that
Yeah.
the deviation index, where I think he said that one of the boards or something of the radiologists came up with it or something to make it like a standardized thing across all manufacturers, if that makes sense.
yeah. Yeah, right there. Yeah, I see. So you have Natalie, I think you're saying like you have like a range for your EI value that has been determined by the manufacturer as like a adequate diagnostic image. But then your S number, or I'm just going to say S number because that's what I use too. Your S number is just a readout from that, specific exposure you took.
I see
Yes.
what you're saying.
Yeah. So like table 32.2, it'll say like all the manufacturers and then what
Oh, I see that.
their exposure indicator is. So like for
Okay.
YouTube, we have that too. It's the S number. So REI is the S number. It's the S
Okay.
value. Or like if it's like Philips has the EI, that'll be the readout. Or like Swiss Ray, whatever, they use the dose indicator, a DI,
I
but
see.
that's their exposure indicator. That's what they use.
They really should.
Okay.
It's my goodness gracious.
Okay.
I know it's yeah.
Yeah. Because then you have like the logarithmic,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have the proportional, and then the inversely proportional.
Yeah. So like we use for the S number, it would be, I believe it'd be inversely proportional. That's the deviation index of the, because
Yeah, us too.
because the lower the number, the more radiation. So it
Mhm.
makes it
Yeah.
inversely. But then there's other manufacturers that could do like the proportional. It's directly related to the actual exposure in microgray. Yeah, that's how I'm understanding. Watch it be completely wrong, and I'm over here telling
No,
you
I think
guys.
I was following along with that. I think that helps a lot.
Yeah.
Do we
And
all have the inversely proportional at our sites? Yeah. Nice.
yeah. So I'm reading in my notes here. So for inappropriate clinical use of the deviation index, I'm not sure where that is in the book.
Page 550.
Okay. It says the DI is not the sole identifier of an acceptable technique. So I think, like if it pops up as like you say your S number pops up hot, or like you can't just go off of your S number when
Yeah,
determining if that's a repeatable or non-repeatable.
I've totally seen that happen with poor collimation. Like if you're doing a hand or something, but you've exposed like the entire plate,
Yeah,
it's gonna mess it all up.
Yeah.
yeah,
And then I've seen texts where they like it'll be that S number and it's like that whole plate. But
Yeah,
then once they crop it, the S number changes.
sure does.
oh, because you're cutting out all like the raw exposure values,
Yeah.
so it's like shrinking your histogram, is
Yeah,
that correct?
I
Mhm.
And then
believe
that's
it's true.
and then
So
that's bringing your median in.
mm-hmm.
Okay.
Extremes off, or at least one side, who knows, depending, but
Yeah.
pathology, like if what is it, pneumo, whatever, when their lungs are filled with fluid, that
Yeah.
made
Fluorofusion?
yeah,
Yeah.
prosthesis. We did take a picture of a patient on a table. It was like a kid and the shield was underneath. Like the kid was sitting on the shield. So that was a real
Yeah.
bummer. That definitely threw the S number off. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I felt like I understood the errors. I just was confused with the differences there, but that was really helpful. So thank you. All right, so that's the end of that one. Next chapter was alternative processing algorithms. I have seen
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
requested it, but very rarely. Like, I don't really see people changing this. But in surgery, they didn't like it. The patient was a very large patient, so they didn't want it run on spine. They wanted it run on something else, and they were able to see better. So it does definitely happen. I don't know what images they saved or not, but I don't think that's something we should do. Did we have questions about that?
I was just gonna say that I've seen it a lot at my site.
Oh, really?
To be quite honest, like some x-rays that I've taken have been like either really hot or like underexposed, and they'll like start clicking through algorithms. And it never seems to like actually work either, because like if it's too hot, then you're oversaturating the plate, and so it can't, it can't get a histogram out of it, a proper one. And then if it's too low of an exposure, then like what Professor Steele has said, like low, like mass cannot make up for underpenetration.
Yeah, I mean,
So
if it's not reaching the plate, there's nothing
yeah,
to do to make that better. It's just not there.
right, right. But I have seen it at my site.
Yeah, same. But I've never seen it where they change it after the fact, like on the console, like before they're doing a chest, like the tech will be like, oh, I'm gonna put it on foot. And then he like changes the techniques, but I've never seen it after the fact. And then there's times like in the beginning where I didn't know what he was doing. And so I was trying to help him out by putting chest and he would like freak out on me.
You kept putting it back.
He was like, no, I
Yeah.
got the technique. So it's, you do really see it in real life, but I've never seen it after the fact. It's only before they'll change the technique to something crazy and you think they're not prepared yet, but I guess they have it down for them.
Interesting. Is that because of AEC? Like they're using the techniques that come up with the AEC, or?
It's not even always AEC because they'll like this guy, he'll sometimes do like um certain x-rays. I can't even think of it off the top of my head, but on the console it'll say it's like for tabletop, let's say like an L spine, and he'll do it, but then he'll switch everything, but he just has it on L spine.
Weird.
I don't know. I don't know.
To each
So
their own, I suppose. But they did, I mean, Professor Steele made it pretty clear we shouldn't be doing that unless asked, and then we save like both images, I guess, and both.
I like accidentally took a lateral a lateral chest x-ray on the actual PA format. So then when the lateral image came back, it was like weird and it was like all dark. And he's like, oh, because you took it on the wrong algorithm. So he went back and like changed it to lateral, and then it like completely like fixed the image. It was crazy.
Yeah, and that's allowable, right? Because you saved it under what it actually was.
Mhm.
I do
Yeah.
see, like, because sometimes they'll come in for a chest x-ray. We think it's going to be PA, but they're in the wheelchair. So we end up doing it AP and then just switching it after, if make it faster for the patient. All right, windowing, smoothing, edge enhancement. Anybody? Thoughts on these?
That I still don't really get that whole like smoothing and edge enhancement thing, because I don't think I've ever seen it done.
I haven't
That's
either.
why.
Or if I have, I didn't recognize that I was seeing it. But basically, in my understanding, is they're opposites. So like the edge enhancement can enhances the edges and makes things a little more defined, whereas the smoothing like can smooth things out, if that makes any sense. That was like my biggest thing. But the edge enhancement, he made a big deal, will not recover lost data. It's just like filling it in, by guessing, I guess, or extrapolating by what's near it. And the smoothing was useful for only small amounts of model. With the edge enhancement, you can have the halo effect where lights become lighter and darks become darker, which was this picture. And I thought it was cute because it's a dog leg. Obviously, I like dogs. But yeah, I don't, if I've seen that, I didn't know about it. I see for the next, I definitely have seen the image reversal, dark to light, light to dark a lot, especially when they're putting in like checking for PIC line placement or something. A lot of times they will look and it's just a lot easier to see. Nothing is different and they don't change it permanently. They just look, oh, it's where it's supposed to be, and then revert it back to the normal image. Dark masking made sense to me because it's what was that Chuck said? When you have white all around, it's like harder to look at something.
Filtering.
The veil, I think it's like the
Oh yeah, the veil
layer.
layer.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
if it's dark around it, it just makes it easier for your eyes. So I think that's what the dark masking was all about. And then
And I think dark masking is something that just automatically happens, right?
I think so. Also, we have 10 minutes left.
Oh,
Sorry, guys.
That's okay.
But we need to make sure we get to everybody's questions. Quality criteria. This is one of the things that he asked about. These are the 8 things. And you were talking about this too, Natalie. And I think these are all 8 things that I definitely think that we need to know. And then the next section kind of like lumped them together, I guess, because these are the primary controlling factors. So there are more, but these are the primary ones. Film-based and then DR. And then I highlighted what's done by the radiographer in film, like all of these things. Whereas in digital radiography, the only thing technically is the alignment. Everything else is done by the computer system.
Mhm.
Oh, we need Zach's question too.
The signal to noise ratio.
Start talking about it. I will catch up in the notes. I think it's on the next. Good.
Yeah.
So what was your question about that?
Well, so it gives like all the mass KVP distance filtration generator type. So are those the things that affect signal to noise ratio?
I think so. I mean, we'll take out, yeah, I think so because KV, let's see. Mass is right, how many, right? Quantity.
Yeah.
And KVP, like all these things can create scatter, right? Which can create noise. The distance, like if you have a bigger distance, you could potentially have less photons.
Yeah.
I feel like because it's like how much of, correct me if I'm wrong, but what this is asking is like how much of everything that gets received by the image detector, what of it is actual diagnostic image stuff and what is it is noise that we picked up along the way. And these are the
Okay.
ways that we can pick up the noise. So it needs to be a certain percentage of the actual diagnostic data and
Okay.
not as much of the noise, which is why underexposure is really bad. Because then it's
Okay.
predominantly noise, like so the ratio would be way high.
I see.
That makes sense.
Wrong, but that was my understanding of signal to noise ratio. We just want to make sure we have a certain amount more of useful information as opposed to stuff that's just fogging up our image, getting in the way.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It does.
Daniel, your question?
Oh, yeah, I think that leads in to
Yeah, which I
Yeah,
took
the
notes for. So
fog pattern cleanup. I was
Yeah.
just confused on how it's applied to the image.
that one was on page 582. And I just picked this little picture because I was like, what in the heck is this?
Yeah.
And I was so confused. So I'm glad that you had this question. 582. So I think it's asking about like specific patterns that the computer can recognize and clean just those up. Does anyone else get that?
I think, yeah, it ties into previous material, like about the frequency processing, um, and like how it appears to the system. Like smaller structures correspond to high frequencies and larger structures to low frequencies. And then, but I don't like the picture.
That picture that
Like,
I have there.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it's asking it to identify them by size.
okay.
Because if the computer can identify, it says frequencies of a certain size and eliminate them from chapter 31. As long as we know the typical size of an artifact within the image, we can target it for elimination. But we have to know that anatomical structures of the same size will also be eliminated. So you wouldn't want to do it on, I don't know, something that's like their example is the lumbar spine, I believe, and those like the bones are pretty big. So I think that they could fog would be smaller, so they would have less risk of taking out anatomical structures because nothing would be in that 2 to 3 hertz frequency fog pattern.
Okay.
That
Doesn't fogging have to do with KVP too? 'Cause
I think it depends on DR or CR because you
Yeah.
have like pre-fogging for CR, but like Professor Steele talked about for DR, it only like accepts radiation when it's engaged, but for CR, because the phosphor plate is always able to be exposed, like even if it's sitting in the back,
makes
you're
sense.
still gonna have light and possible scatter hitting that. Um, so I think it's easier to detect for DR. Um, but to answer your question, um,
I
I
think the answer is
think
yes.
it does.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it does also. I think this was just talking about this processing capability, the specific cleanup capability.
Yeah.
But could that potentially result to data clipping if you said that it
Yeah.
can?
It says anatomical structures of the same size will also be eliminated. So you would need to be careful when you use it.
Yeah. I don't think we can use this though. I think it's like just built in through frequency processing. I think it's just saying that this occurs
And is
with
it not
certain,
something that we can control? It's something that just automatically happens, and
I
if
think
it data
so.
clips, it data clips.
Based on the exam that we've chosen, correct? So it wouldn't be on all,
Yeah.
but it would be included in like the lumbar spine, whatever they're talking about in this section of the book.
Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that. Okay, cool. Those are our main questions. I think I hit everybody. Speed class.
Yeah. And I thought like this was going over topics that we have like in 32 and 33 specifically, like it's going over topics that we've like grazed over in Professor Scooter Laurie's class, but now we're seeing like it more in depth and different ways to think about it.
And I think we're seeing them happening in real time in our sites, which is kind of cool, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the big topics too on this chapter was how Professor Scudder talked about dose creep.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, looking at your EI value, but not necessarily looking at your technique or using AEC when you could, use AEC and then do manual techniques, look at your S number and, go from there.
That wide latitude. Oh, it's not.
Yeah, that popped up again.
Yeah, it sure did.
And that's moving away from, like how older texts talk about, their techniques, but they could reduce their mass.
Totally. I even seen it. I see it a lot at CMH also with different texts that went through different programs. Like
Yeah.
some of the Moorpark, like they tend to do their knees free plate, where most of the other texts will do it in the bed. So
Yeah.
I can see a lot of different things around that.
Sorry, guys, we have less than a minute. I don't know.
I know. Any last questions? Or I think we all did our
Yeah.
good luck.
Yeah.
If there's any other questions, we can just use our group chat to circle back. I know we kind of had to rush there at the end, but I appreciate what a lot of you said about